how did you manage 30 people? What was your process? Were you checking in with them on a weekly basis? Was it just a ton of emails, FaceTime, that kind of stuff back and forth? How did you go about that to keep everyone happy? Because I'd imagine too, when you've got dozens of deals flying around and you're just one person, it gets overwhelming.
It was crazy. I look back on those as like some of the best times because they were so wild and there was never a dull moment. And wasn't sleeping. I wasn't doing anything. And I had no social life for 15 years. Like, I genuinely did not take a vacation for the first at least 12 years of my career. And the personal life was like non existent. So that was a big thing, but I was so focused on doing it that it didn't feel like a sacrifice. It felt like I was energized by it. And I think that's all. It was also a different time where you had to be so all in because there weren't companies built to do this. It was like out of necessity. You just had to do every part of the job. I got to the point that I had never obviously had another job, so I didn't know how to manage my inbox. I didn't know how to do these basic things. I was also doing all of the invoicing and payments and collections and paying talent and just like all the chaotic things that I realized I couldn't even find an email that came in my inbox because I had hundreds of emails. They weren't organized. It was all just a mess. And I was like, this is not sustainable. I'm going to go crazy. So I got a couple people that I met through college. They worked for me. One was like an assistant, one was a coordinator. They were kind of like offloading some of the work, talking to the talent a little bit, doing some of the back and forth on email. That helped. And then once I moved to LA, I made a very concerted effort to reduce the size of the roster to have, maybe 15 clients that were really high value and not have 30 just to have 30, and then have more support staff working directly with me and those clients so that I almost had like day-to-day managers helping with the clients. So it wasn't just on me and then maybe an assistant like chiming in here and there. It was like a team effort, and building a team around the client is the thing that allowed me to scale and keep going because you have people you trust that are running point on the execution and the deliverables, things that a manager doesn't really need to be worried about, like getting a Instagram post up on time. Like, that should be something that the client obviously needs to do, and maybe they need someone to nudge them, but that's not the best use of the manager's time. So building systems like that where things were more on autopilot helped me, keep up with everything. The 30 was unsustainable unless I had a team, and then I ended up running the business, and that was a whole other thing. Yeah, it was chaotic.
Let's double click on that 30 to 15 transition. How did you decide? Because I think this is a problem, Scott, that more, management companies face is, do they want to go for scale and get as many people as possible? And there's, inevitably you're going to have your tier A, B, and C types of creators in terms of what they're earning, their earning potential, and also just ease of working together. If they're easy to work with, obviously manager is going to enjoy it. Some people not responding to things, not responding to opportunities, you're losing money, you're losing time. How did you decide to cut that 30 to 15? What was your criteria for that?
Yeah, and we still do this today at Select, where we look at obviously the revenue, we look at the client's long-term goals and what they want to do. Do they align with ours? We look at working together. Is it a positive relationship? Is it rewarding on both sides? And you have to weigh all those factors. Just because someone's having an off year revenue wise, it doesn't mean you necessarily need to drop them. But if they're having their revenues down and there's no long term plan and they're really hard to work with, there is no reason to have them on the roster. If they're amazing to work with and you believe in the long term plan, then yeah, keep them if the revenue wasn't working. So we do that to this day. We have 450 clients. Every client, every quarter, we analyze all of those data points and show them to the managers so they have a visual of their roster and they can see, okay, this client's really successful, but the revenue is actually a lot lower than expected, and this is happening. So maybe I need to figure out what's off with them and help them improve this, and like kind of go through each client and analyze all of these things. And I did that in the early days to just optimize and know that I was spending time on things that were moving the needle. And my whole motto is like, work smart, not hard. Like, there's no reason you should be spinning your wheels on something that's not eventually going to become business success for you and the client. And it's, as a manager, your number one job is to do right by your client. And if you are representing someone and you're not moving forward and you're hitting walls and it's not working and the revenue's not there or whatever it is, you're doing them a disservice by continuing to work with them, because maybe there's someone that could be a better fit for them. Maybe they need to change things about what they're doing and then come back and then you can help them execute. So it's always like kind of similar to if the manager and the client are both happy it's working. If something isn't working, don't try to push it forward and just like wait for it to figure itself out. Like something has to change. And it's always better to analyze it and deal with it in the moment than, just hope it works out.
Before you guys split ways with a creator or influencer, do you try and transition them to a different manager internally? Do you kind of play that mix and match to see if hey, maybe it can work with somebody else, and then if you try a couple of times, you go your separate ways?
Yeah, it's very personal, and that's why I said like sometimes there are personal relationships that are just better, or bandwidth issues with managers, or whatever the reason ends up being. Chances are like there's not tons of moving within the company because we obviously feel good about our managers and their ability to service a client. But there have been situations where maybe even another manager comes on to co-manage just to offer more support, and that client loves both managers and they kind of do it together. That happens a lot, especially when a lot of our managers have grown within the company, so they started as coordinators and they became managers. Sometimes a coordinator will work with a client and then get promoted, and then we'll still work with them with the manager originally, and they kind of continue as a team. And the clients that I had over the last 12 years, a handful of them are still obviously with the company, and they now work with people that used to be their coordinators who are now their managers. And it's like a nice evolution. So there's some of that. And then for the most part, the managers really work as a team to talk about, how they're feeling, get perspectives from each other. If something's not working, they can ask, the 25 other managers how it's working for them. And they are able to kind of work through problems together. Or like if they're hitting a wall with what to do for a client, they're able to get ideas from their whole group of peers that can then help them. All that stuff it just helps everyone kind of stay more in line and in sync.